It's Worship Wednesday here at Read Write Rodeo. So go ahead, light yourself a candle, and grab yourself a cup of coffee. Today we're going to dive into the book of Jonah. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it, to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Wow. So Jonah literally heard a direct message from God telling him to go to a certain city, and instead of being like, all right, I'm trusting you, God, he thought he could run from God. I think we all are guilty of that. Maybe we don't recognize that we're hearing God's voice as strongly as Jonah did, but he ran, and I think we're all guilty of that sometimes. But the Lord sent out a great wind on the sea, and there was a mighty tempest out of the sea, so that the ship was about to be broken up. Then the mariners were afraid, and every man cried out to his God, and threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea, to help lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest parts of the ship, had laid down, and was fast asleep. So much right there. So, obviously, it was a really bad storm that people actually thought they had to throw stuff overboard. We're very materialistic these days, so that must not have been an easy decision. But the fact that Jonah slept through it, I would be seasick. I'm not quite sure how he was able to sleep through all of that commotion. So the captain came to him and said to him, What do you mean, sleeper? Arise, call on your God. Perhaps your God will consider us, so that we may not perish. So the captain's willing to ask anybody and any supernatural being to help him. And they said to one another, Come, let us cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this trouble has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lots fell on Jonah. Essentially, they were betting to see if Jonah was the reason this was happening. And Jonah was the only likely person, so they just had bets going on. Then they said to him, Please tell us, for whose cause is the trouble upon us? What is your occupation, and where do you come from? What is your country, and of what people are you? So he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. So at least Jonah didn't try to deny who God is. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, Why have you done this? For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Then they said to him, What shall we do to you, that the sea may be calm for us? For the sea was growing more tempestuous. And he said to them, Pick me up and throw me into the sea, then the sea will be calm for you. For I know that this great tempest is because of me. So at least he's taking responsibility. He acknowledges he's the reason that all of this is happening. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to return to land, but they could not, for the sea continued to grow more tempestuous against them. Therefore they cried out to the Lord and said, We pray, O Lord, please do not let us perish for this man's life, and do not charge us with innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and offered a sacrifice to the Lord and took vows. So right here we see where they turned to God. They acknowledged his power and also asked for forgiveness for essentially sacrificing Jonah. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So for 72 hours, people assume it's a whale simply because it has to be a really big fish for Jonah to fit. But for 72 hours, he just sat there. It took that long. I cried out to the Lord because of my affliction, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice, for you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your billows and your waves passed over me. Then I said, I have been cast out of your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. Then the water surrounded me, even to my soul. The deep closed around me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the moorings of the mountains. The earth with its bars closed behind me forever. Yet you have brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God." So Jonah acknowledges that God saved him. "When my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer went up to you into your holy temple. Those who regard worthless idols forsake their own mercy, but I will sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. I will pay what I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord." So the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. So all it took was Jonah acknowledging that God was in control and that God saved him, and then he was free to be on dry ground again. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message that I tell you." So here we are again, back to God's main message and purpose for Jonah's life. He's telling Jonah what to do. Jonah didn't really listen the first time, so God provided a detour, and now Jonah's getting a second try. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent, and Jonah began to enter the city on the first day's walk. Then he cried out and said, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." Another referral to 40 days. 40 is a very common number in the Bible, and so I think you can really make a good change in your life within 40 days. So the people of Nineveh believed God, proclaimed a fast, and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. Then word came to the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne and laid aside his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he caused it to be proclaimed and published throughout Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, saying, "Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink water, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth and cry mightily to God. Yes, let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Who can tell if God will turn and relent and turn away from his fierce anger so that we may not perish?" So, right there, it's clear that the king is desperate. He's in mourning, he's in fasting, and he wants everybody in his kingdom to follow suit to help change God's mind. Then God saw their works, that he turned from their evil way, and God relented from the disaster that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. So it worked. God changed his mind, and Nineveh was saved, all because they mourned, asked for forgiveness, and fasted for 40 days. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he became angry. So he prayed to the Lord and said, "Ah, Lord, was not this what I said when I was still in my country? Therefore I fled previously to Tarshish, for I know that you are a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, one who relents from doing harm. Therefore, now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." So Jonah felt like this whole calling he had was worthless because he assumed God would change his mind anyways. And so now he's suicidal because he feels like he didn't have a purpose in life. Then the Lord said, "Is it right for you to be angry?" So Jonah went out of the city and sat on the east side of the city. There he made himself a shelter and sat under it in the shade, till he might see what would become of the city. And the Lord God prepared a plant and made it come up over Jonah, that it might be shade for his head to deliver him from his misery. So Jonah was very grateful for the plant. But as morning dawned the next day, God prepared a worm, and it so damaged the plant that it withered. So God felt bad for him. Jonah's calling was to essentially save the town. But Jonah didn't feel like that was a good enough purpose. And so God provided him with some comfort. However, the comfort only lasts so long, and now God's ready for Jonah to take some action. And it happened when the sun arose that God prepared a vehement east wind, and the sun beat on Jonah's head, so that he grew faint. Then he wished death for himself and said, "It is better for me to die than to live." So here he is, suicidal again. Then God said to Jonah, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" And he said, "It is right for me to be angry, even to death." So because this plant is also dead, Jonah feels very upset. But the Lord said, "You have had pity on the plant, for which you have not labored, nor made it grow, which came up in a night and perished in a night." So essentially, God provided this plant to help Jonah, and Jonah's upset when it's retracted. But God uses it as a metaphor for something that's really important. "And should I not pity Nineveh, that great city in which are more than 120,000 persons, who cannot discern their right hand and their left, and much livestock?" So here we know that God is saying, like, hey, we need to have pity on these people that aren't the brightest. They can't tell their directions. And so that's why Jonah had to go, was to tell them what to do and be their leader in this situation, because they needed somebody to help guide them away from the mistakes that they'd been making. And so here, God is using it to really say, also have compassion on all the animals, because there's so much livestock that also would have been destroyed. And so I think it's really important that God never forgot about them either. And this is actually where Jonah ends. And so just that snippet of what that conversation was between Jonah and God is super powerful, that says, even in our darkest times, God isn't going to leave us. Now, as far as an update on Rodeo. So I have 2 colts that are 4, and then one that's 3 that I've never rode yet. He's hopefully going to go to a trainer pretty soon. But essentially, I'm trying to decide whether I need to start pushing them to enter them in barrel races called futurities this summer, or if I should wait till next year to enter them. And so this year, it's mostly about hauling them, getting them exposed to different places to see exactly what they can handle and if their minds are going to be able to handle competition, or if they're going to get too anxious and frustrated. So that's the dilemma I'm in. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Remember to read the Bible, write your truth, rodeo for Jesus. I hope you all enjoyed your coffee. Have a great rest of your day.